right, welcome. Today, we're jumping into the massive, vibrant, and honestly incredibly complex world of African literature. It's a journey that covers thousands of years, from ancient stories told around a fire to modern prize-winning novels. It really is a reflection of the soul of an entire continent.
So let's just get right to the heart of the matter with this question, because this is the central challenge, right? I mean, with thousands, literally thousands of languages and countless unique cultures, can you even talk about a single African literature? This was a huge debate back at the famous Makerere University conference in 1962, and it's what makes this whole topic so endlessly fascinating.
So the short answer is no, we're not talking about one single monolithic thing. The best way to think about it is that African literature is a giant umbrella term. It's like a huge library with tons of different wings, holding everything from epic poems recited from memory to novels written in English, French, or Portuguese. It's a collection of many, many literatures, and each one has its own story to tell. To navigate this huge library, we're going to need a map. We can basically chart the history across three big periods. First, you've got the pre-colonial era, which was all about oral traditions, storytelling as a living, breathing performance. Then comes the colonial era, where writing becomes a tool to respond to and resist European rule. And finally, the post-colonial era, where writers explore all the complexities of independence. So let's start at the very beginning. Long before the first book was ever printed on the continent, Africa was overflowing with literature. It just wasn't written down. This was the time of orality, and it is the absolute bedrock, the foundation, for all the stories that would come later. And who better to explain this than the great Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe? I love this quote. He's saying that these oral traditions, like proverbs, aren't just little decorations. They're essential. They're the ingredient that gives language its flavor, its depth, its wisdom. Just like palm oil makes food delicious and easy to swallow, proverbs help us digest meaning and truth. And the sheer variety was just stunning. Orality wasn't just one thing. It was a complete cultural toolkit. You had incredible epics about heroes like Sanjata of Mali, which were basically the history books of their day. You had folktales to teach morals, riddles to keep minds sharp, and praise songs to honor communities. This is how culture, history, and values were passed from one generation to the next. A perfect example, and one of my personal favorites, is the character you see here, Anansi the spider from West African folklore. Anansi is tiny, he is physically weak, but he always outsmarts enemies who are way bigger and stronger than him. He's this amazing symbol of how intelligence and wit can beat brute force, a really powerful message of hope and resistance that even traveled with enslaved Africans all the way to the Caribbean. But then, a powerful new force arrived. Colonialism brought the widespread use of written languages like English and French, and it sparked one of the most fiery and important debates in African intellectual history. What language should an African writer even use to tell their story? And this slide basically stages the intellectual showdown between two literary giants. On one side, you've got Chinua Achebe. He argued that you could take the colonizer's language, English, and bend it, Africanize it, to carry the weight of your own experience to a global audience. But on the other side, the Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o saw it completely differently. For him, using a European language was a form of mental colonization. He argued that real liberation meant writing in indigenous African languages. Here is how Achebe himself put it. He didn't see English as a prison. He saw it as a tool, a key, even a passport, as he once called it. He believed he could master it and infuse it with Igbo proverbs and rhythms, basically forcing it to tell his community's story to the entire world. But wow, Ngugi's counterpoint is just so powerful. For him, this wasn't about practicality, it was deeply political. The colonizer's language wasn't just a communication tool, it was a weapon, just like the bullet. One controlled your body, the other was designed to control your mind, your very soul. Now, the debate wasn't just black and white. You had other fascinating perspectives, like this one from the Algerian writer Kate Yastin. He called the French language one of the spoils of war. Think about that. In his view, using the colonizer's language wasn't a form of surrender. It was a form of victory. You're taking something from the enemy and using it for your own purposes. So this whole explosive debate about language, it was part of a much bigger conversation happening all across Africa and the diaspora. It was all about forging a new, shared identity, a Black consciousness in the face of centuries of oppression.
And a huge part of that was the negritude movement. It kicked off in Paris, of all places, with writers from Africa and the Caribbean. And what they did was radical. They took the word nègre, which was used as a racial slur, and they reclaimed it. They turned it into a banner of pride. It was this incredible act of self-love and a total rejection of the colonial idea that they had to become more French to be worthy. And you can just feel the spirit of negritude in the poetry. This is from a poem by Leopold Sédar Senghor, who would go on to be the first president of Senegal. It is pure celebration. Instead of accepting European ideals, he just glorifies blackness itself, saying its color is life, its form is beauty. But of course, negritude had its critics. Wole Soyinka, another Nigerian literary giant, dropped this legendary line in response. And his point is so sharp. Why does blackness have to be so loudly proclaimed and defended? A tiger doesn't walk around shouting about its tigerness. It just is a tiger. Soyinka felt the movement was still, in a way, defining itself in reaction to Europe, performing for a Western audience. So whether it was through negritude or some other path, a whole generation of writers took on a very clear mission: to talk back, to write back to the colonial powers that had spent centuries trying to define them. And this, right here, is the very essence of postcolonial literature. I absolutely love this metaphor. For so long, the world had only seen one version of Africa, a photograph taken by the colonizer from their perspective. Postcolonial literature is all about flipping that photograph over to finally see the story from the other side, from the perspective of the people who were in the frame but never got to hold the camera. And the most famous, most powerful example of this writing back has to be the story behind Things Fall Apart. Chinua Achebe was tired of European books like Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which basically painted Africa as this primitive, savage place. So he wrote a direct response. Things Fall Apart is his masterpiece, showing the rich, complex, and dignified Igbo society before the white man ever arrived. So when you get right down to it, this kind of literature is so much more than just art. It's a political act. It's about taking back your own history, correcting the record, and asserting your own humanity against a global power that tried to erase it. It's about grabbing the microphone back. Which kind of leaves us with one final big thought. We've seen how powerful literature can be, a tool to tear down old narratives and build new identities. And as the African continent continues to write its own future, that power is more important than ever. So the question for the next generation of storytellers, and really for all of us, is this: what stories do we need to tell now to shape the world of tomorrow?